So we've been talking about Peter, and one of the interesting things I think about Peter is whenever you read a story about him, it's kind of like looking in the mirror. How many of you have ever had that experience with Peter? So who wants to tell me what we've looked at with Peter so far and help the people that haven't been to all of our Peter stories catch up a little bit with us? Who remembers one of the Peter stories? Okay, Amy, you've got your hand up.
One of them, well, the last one that I was there for is the one where he goes up to the mount,
Okay.
and he sees Jesus being transformed. And there he sees Moses and Elijah, and he immediately says, well, he falls on his knees for fear. And then he says, let's build a tabernacle for Jesus, for Moses, and for Elijah. And then they came down from the mount, but Jesus tells him something while he's in the mountain when he says, let's build, but I forget what he said.
Do you remember what the Father said to him while he was in the mountain? He
said,
yes,
the Father said, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Listen to him,
that's right, yeah. Peter said, Lord, it's good for us to be here. We can build something for you. Yeah, that was kind of cool. All right, thank you, Amy. Is there another Peter story that anyone remembers? Maybe the first one that Diane told about the fish? Catching a lot of fish? Go ahead, Susan.
Oh, that's the one where they had been fishing all night and they hadn't caught anything. And then Jesus had told them to go out and fish again. And then when they went out the next time, they caught a whole lot of fish. And then Peter was, he realized that Jesus had God's power with him. And he felt, I guess he felt afraid. And didn't he fall down at his feet and say that he was a sinful man?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Yeah, sinful man.
Susan, do you remember what he said when Jesus told him, go, let's go out again. Let's go out into deep water, go fishing again. Did he immediately agree to do that?
No, he didn't want to go.
Oh, he didn't want to go. He felt he knew better than Jesus, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All the guilty people, raise your hand. Think you know better than Jesus sometimes? You can close your eyes if you don't want to see anybody else raise their hand. All right, has there been another Peter story that we told? Did Jing tell a story on Peter?
Yeah, this when Jesus is in the mountain alone, and then their disciples is on the way to go to the other side in the middle of the sea lakes. There's a big storm, and they're in the middle of the water and in the middle of the night, and Jesus walk on the water toward them, and they are very afraid. But Jesus said, don't be afraid, it's me. And Peter immediately said, if it's you, Lord, command me to walk to you on the water. And Jesus said, come. And then Peter immediately come out of the boat and walk on the water. And then when he saw around the wind is big, and he be afraid. He became afraid, and he think. And he said, Lord, save me. And Jesus immediately said, stretched his arm and take Peter's hand.
Right. So how far away was Peter from Jesus when he stretched out his arm?
It's just the arms.
An arm's length. He almost made it. Yeah. So, Lord, it's getting really hot in here, so let me jump out of the frying pan into the fire. Did we do any other Peter stories? I think Vivian told the story. I don't remember what story Vivian told. Did she? Oh, she told the one about the transfiguration, didn't she? Okay, well, this story is towards the end of Jesus's ministry. And Jesus had told his disciples that it's very interesting. He told them, sell whatever you need to sell and get some swords. And the disciples said, we have 2 swords. Is that enough? And Jesus said, 2 swords is enough. And we really don't understand why all that happened, but it's just kind of interesting he did that. And then Jesus told his disciples that everyone was going to leave him. And Peter said, I'm going to die for you if I have to before I leave you. And Jesus said, no, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And Peter could not accept that. And they had celebrated the Last Supper of the Lord there. And they're about to do what's in this story. So let's go to the story, shall we? Okay, so here's what the Bible says, and I'm going to be cheating a little because I'm going to be reading the story because it's a little difficult for me to have remembered it all. Jesus and his disciples crossed the brook Kidron, and there was a garden there which Jesus and his disciples went into. Now, Judas, who betrayed Jesus, he also knew the place because Jesus often met in this garden with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and their officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went with lanterns and torches and weapons to the garden. Then Jesus, who knew everything that would happen to him, took a step forward and said to that group of soldiers and officers, "Whom are you looking for?" And they answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." So Jesus said to them, "I am." And Judas, who betrayed them, was standing with the soldiers and the officers. Now, when Jesus said, "I am," they took a step back and fell down to the ground. So Jesus asked them again, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus said, "I told you I am. So if you seek me, let these men go free." And this was to fulfill the word that was spoken by Jesus, "Of those whom you have given me, I have not lost anyone." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, he drew it and he struck the high priest's servant and cut off his ears. And the servant's name was Malchus. And Jesus said to Peter, "Peter, put your sword back into its sheath. Shouldn't I drink the cup that the Father has given me to drink?" And that's where our story ends today. It's kind of an interesting story, isn't it? Would anyone like to try to repeat this story as best you can? And I know it may be the first time because you may be used to reading it from another version or from another gospel. Starting with Jesus and his disciples crossed the brook Kidron and entered a garden, which was on the other side of the brook, Jesus and his disciples.
Diane raised her hand.
Who did?
Diane.
Diane? Okay, Diane, go ahead.
Jesus crossed the brook Kidron, and there was a garden there. And meanwhile, Judas, one of the disciples, had gathered a group of soldiers from the chief priests and maybe somebody else. And they came to where Jesus was because it was a place that Jesus often came. And they had lanterns and torches and weapons. And as they approached, Jesus said to them, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus says, I am he. And the soldiers fell back a step and fell down. And then Jesus asked again, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus said, "I am he." And then this was to fulfill what Jesus, what had been said, that Jesus would protect those who were his, or something maybe like that. And then Peter pulled out a sword and cut off the ear of the high priest's servant, Malchus. And Jesus said, put your sword away. I must drink the cup.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Did you write this story or what, Diane? That was perfect. And that was like, wow, you got everything right. I mean, Malchus and the high priest and the garden. And let's just give Diane a big applause. Huh? That was really, really good, Diane. Really, really, really good. Well, let's go through it together, okay? So Jesus and his disciples crossed the brook, and the brook has a special name to it that you may not remember. Kidron, the Kidron Brook, right? And what was on the other side of the Kidron Brook?
Garden.
A garden. And what did Jesus and his disciples do after they crossed the brook then?
Went into the garden.
They went into the garden, right? Yeah. And so Judas, did Judas know about the place?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Judas, who betrayed Jesus, knew about the place because Jesus often met there with some group of people.
Pharisees.
The disciples.
His disciples. The Pharisees come into this in just a
Oh,
second.
later.
So Judas procured a band of soldiers and their officers. And who did he get them from?
The priests.
This is it, Susan, the Pharisees.
Pharisees and
There you
priests.
go. Okay. I
Thank
didn't
you,
get
Carol.
it. And they went there. What kind of weapons did they have when they went there?
Lanterns.
Torches.
Torches,
And
lanterns, and weapons. And Jesus, did he know what was going to happen to him?
Yes.
Yes.
He knew everything that was going to happen to him. And he said, who are you looking for? And they said,
Jesus.
Jesus.
Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus immediately called down a whole band of 12 legions of angels that wiped everybody out, and that saved him.
Almost.
He didn't.
He didn't do that. He didn't do that, did he? Jesus said, I am.
I am.
I am. He said, I am. He said, I am. That's right. And when he said that, what did they do?
They fell back.
Backward and
Fell
fell down on the
ground.
ground.
Now, I'm kind of lost. Just give me a second. Okay. So when Jesus said to them, I am, they fell back and fell to the ground. And who was with this group of soldiers?
Judas.
Judas. Okay. I just got a little confused there. They answered, whom do you seek? Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am. Judas, who betrayed Jesus, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, I am, they drew back and fell to the ground. Okay. So Jesus asked them again, who are you
Looking
for? And they said,
Jesus.
Jesus of Nazareth. And so Jesus said, I told you that I am he. So if you're looking for me, what should you do with my disciples?
Let them go.
Let them go. And he said this, like Diane said, to fulfill the word that was spoken, of those whom you gave me, I have lost
No one.
None.
zero. Right. And then what did Simon Peter do?
He took out
They
his sword.
took out his sword
Took out
and
his sword,
cut
And
off the ear of the
ear.
servant.
cut off the ear of the high servant,
High servant.
the priest's high servant. And what was that servant's name? Does anyone remember? Malchus. He made it into the Bible. Malchus made it into the Bible. And Jesus said something to Peter.
Put your sword back.
Yes, okay.
Do not drink this
The
cup.
cup that the Father,
Has given
Give
me.
me
should I
that
not drink?
I not drink.
Right. You guys did so good. Wow, that's fantastic. That's a difficult story. I'm so glad y'all helped me. Now I got a question for you. Jesus had told his disciples to bring swords. And Peter said, I'm going to die for you if I have to. And Peter has a chance and he runs forward and uses his sword. And Jesus says, put the sword back. And in another story, he heals the high priest, the servant's ear. How do you think that might have made Peter feel?
Embarrassed.
Okay. Embarrassed. Anybody else?
Confused, I think.
A little confused?
Frustrated.
Frustrated. Yeah, I like that.
I'm not sure he's thinking anything because he may be quite frightened by the presence of these soldiers and by what he's just done.
Oh my gosh. Scared, huh?
Mhm.
All right, well, that's interesting. Well, let's look at this story because I think the story is very interesting. Jesus and his disciples crossed the brook Kidron and entered into the garden that was on the other side of the brook Kidron. And Judas, who betrayed Jesus, knew the place because Jesus often went there. And Judas had procured a group of soldiers and their officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they went there also with torches, lanterns, and weapons. So my question is, and I don't understand Jesus too well in this one, could Jesus have done anything different? I mean, he knew what was going to happen, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
He knew, the story tells us he knew what was going to happen. Could he have done something different besides cross the brook right into the garden where these group of soldiers are just basically coming in to meet him?
Could have gone someplace unfamiliar, kind of,
Yes.
a new place.
Different place, okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
One second here, Claudia, I got you. Okay. Okay, Claudia, you got to turn one of your things off. Okay, there you go. Wait, I'm gonna turn this. Wait. Boom. Okay, there you go. Try that now.
I don't know where I am.
You're
Got a
right there.
blank in front of me.
Okay, but we can hear you and see you. We can hear you and see you.
Okay. Okay. Well, wasn't there a timing? I mean, didn't Jesus have to be caught at a certain time for everything to come together the way that it was supposed to, so that he died at the right time?
I don't. That's a really
As
good
the
question.
Passover lamb?
What do y'all think about that? That's a really good question that Claudia asked.
Sounds right.
Yeah, I think it's really so beautiful how he died during that special feast of the Passover,
Mhm.
remembering the Passover lamb. Well, when the lamb's blood was on that thing. I mean, it's such beautiful, like, fulfillment, I guess, of that whole feast. So yeah, I mean, he could have gone like back to Nazareth or something, but yeah, God had it all.
So what might we learn about Jesus that he was willing to go along with this deal?
He was determined to do God's will.
Oh, that's interesting. Susan, you just unmuted yourself. Did
Yes,
you-
I thought I heard something. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing was that Danielle just said about he was fulfilling God's will. He knew what was going to happen and he chose to do that. He had the free will not to do that, but he chose to do that. And also, I do think it's a beautiful what Cheryl said also that, I always feel that the Passover ties me to my Jewish friends, and I love that overlap, if you will.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow, thank you. Appreciate this. What do y'all think about what Susan and Cheryl said that
I think he could have done it in a large crowd,
okay.
but that would have put even more people at risk. And by doing it with just the disciples, I think it puts them on the hook in the sense that later on, if Jesus had been off by himself, they could have said to themselves, but we could have stopped it if only we'd been there.
Oh, wow.
But they're there
That's interesting.
and nobody else is there. It's on them. And yet Jesus is going to say, no, it's not on you. he's gonna step in between.
Right, but that's later.
Yeah.
That's later. That's later. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And
Yeah, but I mean, that's, I think Jesus on purpose is not just there, but there with these guys as opposed to in a bigger group or by himself.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I had not thought about that other people might have gotten hurt
Yeah,
besides just Malchus. It's
that's
kind of
interesting.
interesting. So what might we learn about the Father who's approving of all of this? This is his son.
I imagine that if he was watching, which he was,
Yeah.
that it must have brought him just as much like heartache watching it happen, right? When the people came to ask of him, and he's confessing that yes, it's me. He's seeing beforehand what's to come and the pain that it must have brought him. To then think about the things that are coming.
Thank you, Amy.
I think also I never thought about this before, but maybe I think as a father, it would have given him, besides the sadness of the whole thing that was going to happen, just, I don't know if it's the right word, like proud of his son, because he was so willing. And then he said, let these go. And so he was just loving, even in that part. I don't know. As a father, he probably thought, wow,
That is
my son's doing good.
And another story. Go ahead, Diane. I'm sorry.
I think it shows that this whole sin and separation from God is really serious. That he's willing to let this transpire, that there's not another way, there's not another workaround, but that God's holiness is really serious. And so is this marring of the image of God in people.
Wow. Not another workaround. I like that.
I also wonder, thinking about what Cheryl said, maybe there was an excitement in his heart too, because this is his son who left to come. And so this was going to be the beginning of the end so that they can be together again.
Yeah, boy, I tell you what, that's something else. So Judas knew the place, and he took some soldiers from the chief priests and the Pharisees. Now, just as a side note, the chief priests and the Pharisees had sent soldiers to arrest Jesus on an earlier occasion, and they came back, and the chief priest said, well, why didn't you arrest him? He said, nobody spoke like this man. So now we see that they're sending some more soldiers, and Judas is kind of running the show here. Could Judas have chosen something different to do than just betray Jesus? What could he have done?
It's an interesting thing in that Jesus had to be betrayed. And how much of it was Judas's choice? I mean, if Judas had chosen not to, somebody was going to somewhere down the line, because it had to happen. And it had to happen right then, because there was a timing. God gives us choices. So I would say, yes, he did have a choice. Okay. But I think the choice was not that night. I think the choice was back before he gave himself over to doing this. Or he made up his mind to do it.
Now, we do know that Judas kept the money bag, and he took what was in it for his own personal use on occasion. and you mentioned he chose to do this betrayal earlier. Do you think that had something to do with it, Claudia?
Well, there was when there's the Last Supper, it said that Satan entered Judas and that he left at that point.
Yes.
So I am guessing somewhere back there he had made an alliance with something other than God.
Wow.
And
Wow,
so he
wow.
was following that path. He had already decided.
And Jesus knew all of this, right?
He loved him anyways.
And it didn't put a stop to it?
No.
Could
Knew
someone
what he
help
had to
me?
do.
Someone help me understand that?
If Jesus would stop Judas, if Jesus would stop people from having a free will, then we don't have a free will.
Oh.
Either we've got it or we don't. And if we have it, then yes, then we have it. And he will back off and let us go down that path if we insist. Or we don't have free will and we're all puppets and, you know.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I don't think that's the case. What do y'all think? Do you think we're puppets, or do you think there's some free will here?
Free will.
I don't think he needed to have a betrayer necessarily. Jesus could have just marched right into, the camp of the high priest and say, I hear y'all been looking for me.
Yeah, I could have done that too.
But the prophecies had to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Isn't there prophecies about him being betrayed?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. I think Psalm 109, when you all have a chance to look at Psalm 109, it's a pretty brutal psalm. You might want to look at it on another occasion. Let's go on to the next part of the story. So Jesus, knowing everything that would happen to him, took a step forward and said, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus said, "I am." Now Judas was with them. And when Jesus said, "I am," they took a step backward and fell down. What kind of impact did that have on the soldiers and on Judas that are now lying on the ground?
When Moses talked to God in the bush,
Yeah.
said, "Who do I say is sending me?" And he said, "I am."
Okay.
Is that what Jesus was saying then?
Well, was it? I don't know. That's a
I
good question. Is Jesus, because it does say "I am" right there.
Proclamation. It
Is
sounds like
Jesus-
it to me.
So the people end up on their backs. So what do you think we might learn about Jesus when he said, "I am"?
Pretty powerful.
It was very shocking to those people.
Well, did it stop them?
No.
So what might we learn about them? That it didn't stop them. That's just kind of strange.
It seems like a bad idea to proceed.
You've got to love Diane's ability to do understatement.
I mean, can't you just see it like, whoa? I mean, they got to have heard both the side of their masters and
Right.
also that this guy casts out demons, heals people, feeds large crowds. And if you're not a little nervous about going and arresting that guy, you're just not paying attention. And then there you are, face down. You should be really thinking that somebody else should have been sent on this job, like that guy you don't like.
Yeah, they're face up. They took a step backwards and fell down, so they're probably face up.
Yeah. I kind of think of them as like dominoes, they were probably so it's dark. So maybe they're all crowding in to try to see who this is. And then when he says "I am," and it's like so shocking, the people in the front like fall back, and I just see them all kind of like going. It seems like a very embarrassing thing for soldiers to happen to soldiers.
Yes, it does seem a bit embarrassing. I guess God does have a bit of a sense of humor.
Hold on to that torch. Don't let anything happen to that while you're falling down.
Yeah. So did they need to have weapons and torches? I mean, what good was that going to do against a miracle worker? I don't know. It's kind of strange. And so while they're on the ground, I think they're on the ground. I don't know. Are they still on the ground, do you think?
They're like getting up.
I don't know, because he asked them again, who are you looking for? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth, so they can communicate. And then Jesus says, I told you I am. So if I'm the one you're looking for, let these people go, that it might be fulfilled what he had spoken, of all that you've given me, I've lost none. Another part of that verse is, except the son of perdition. It's just to me, it's a little confusing to me that they would continue on this mission. So y'all could y'all just help explain who these people are that are on this mission, because it just doesn't seem smart.
Well, they were also sent out to do a job, right? So they have to answer to someone else. And there's Judas, who was given a payment, and then these people were sent to find him. So they have to complete the task that's been given to them.
Oh, okay.
So when you ask, like, the way I see it in my head as a movie is like, they fell, then he asks again, and they're trying to get up, and they're asking while they're getting up, like, Jesus of Nazareth, and he's like, oh, they're trying to get their bearings and standing up.
Yeah, wow. This really, I just want to get to Peter on this one, because it's just so interesting. So Peter, having a sword while Amy says they're struggling to get up, or they're a little disoriented, and Peter takes his sword and cuts off the ear of the high priest's servant, Malchus. And I'm kind of wondering if he could have aimed for Judas. And I mean, could he have tried to hit somebody else? I mean, was he aiming for the ear? Was he aiming for the head? Somebody help me with that one. What was he aiming for?
Well, I think maybe this is why this group of men weren't afraid to go after the disciples, after Jesus, protected by the disciples. It had not initially looked like a really hard task.
Okay.
Because now this is just like hitting a bear. I mean, you've got soldiers, and you just hit the high priest's servant. Now you've just made them mad.
Right. It's kind of like running into a cop car, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it doesn't even sound like it sounds like he's along, but not necessarily a soldier.
No, he's a servant of the high priest.
Yeah, so it seems like if you wanted to protect your master, you'd go for a soldier as opposed to a servant. And yeah, the ear seems not helpful.
So the people that went earlier, you remember the soldiers had gone earlier and came back. So is the high priest there, the servant is there for a specific reason, do you think? Maybe to give a report? It says my internet is a little bit unstable. Can y'all still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Then
I
Jesus
was thinking that Peter's not a soldier. He's a fisherman. I don't know how efficient he is with a sword.
I mean,
he might have been swinging wildly and didn't really know what he was doing.
Oh.
Like he's not a trained soldier.
Oh, that's really
Even if he has a sword in his hand.
I see it kind of as an accident that he caught the guy in his ear.
Yeah, that's possible, huh?
Threatening and didn't see the little guy.
Swinging this thing. I don't know what to do with it. Wow.
Dad, you have a bunch of children who might have done something like that. Do you think he was aiming for anybody in particular, or just swinging?
He was aiming for chief priest if he was there.
Oh yeah, he was. Jesus's reaction to this is really interesting. Jesus says to Peter, "Put your sword away. I'm going to have to drink the cup the Father has given me." Peter said he was going to die for Jesus, And he's taken a step forward to do just that. I mean, he's just attacked authority. Now Jesus is telling him you were wrong, but Jesus told him to get swords. So how all the, a later story tells us that Peter denied Jesus. How does all this affect Peter? Roger, you want to say something?
No, excuse me, I was stretching my arm.
I mean, does it help us understand Peter when he ends up denying Jesus? Is Peter a little confused by all this? What impact does this have on Peter? In another story, he heals the ear. And then he says, Peter, put your sword away. Even though I told you to take 2 of them, put your sword away. I'm going to drink the cup the Father's given me to drink. Even though you said you were going to die for me, and now I'm kind of scolding you for that. Oh, what do y'all think about Peter?
Probably pretty confused right about then, I guess.
I wonder if he's mad at himself.
Excuse me?
I wonder if he's mad at himself because he can't seem to get the cues correctly in any of these stories. He's just like,
He's autistic, you say?
he's missing. I feel like he must be thinking, what am I missing here? Like I keep doing the wrong thing. Either prematurely or the opposite of what he's like, premature Peter.
Yeah, like foot and
just-
mouth disease. Wow, I like that, Amy. Thank you, Cheryl.
I kind of think that probably, I mean, at that exact time, I don't think Jesus could like explain everything to Peter,
Okay.
but I kind of feel like, well, obviously he didn't want the guys with the swords to attack. I mean, we see that that was not the reason for the swords. So I kind of think that the swords were to make sure that the disciples were defended. I don't think Jesus wanted to lose any of them. And so maybe that was probably the reason for the swords.
In this story, we saw that Peter was confused and maybe angry at himself, like Amy said, and doing the wrong thing all the time. And I just can't seem to understand what God is doing. Does that still happen today where people don't really understand what God is doing and feel confused and feel like they've done the wrong thing and put their foot in the mouth? And does that still happen today to Christians that love God and are willing to follow him?
Yes.
Yeah, it does? Well, what kind of things happen like that? That would seem strange that would still happen to Christians today. What kind of things?
All kind of things.
Pray for someone and they end up dying?
We don't understand why God allowed the things that happen.
Well, what about you or someone that you know? Have any of you ever been just really confused by what's going on with God and you and everything else outside, and you just don't know what to do about it?
Yeah.
You want to tell me about it? Yeah, I'll go first if you want. I'm a little confused about Lila's death, honestly. There were several hundred people praying for her, and she didn't make it. Tumor cut off her brain stem from her brain and killed her. And
I think that Peter was very obedient to listen to what God had to say. I think he may have recognized God has this under control. So he told him to put the swords down.
Mm.
You know, if we're in a situation where a leader walks in and says, you know, everybody quiet, you know, or something like that. Or there's a big argument, or you're in a group and you're arguing, and somebody says, you're like a leader and says, be quiet, you know, you all just stop what you're doing and listen for the leader to speak. And I think that's how Peter probably looked at that. God is in control of this situation.
Does anyone else have something to share about that?
I feel like, Andrew, like I have had the same kind of experience like you. Prayed and there were so many people praying for a dear friend. And she was diagnosed with cancer, was doing really remarkably well last October. So she even had people, my personal side is she even had people like just kind of working to have a wig made for her, chopped off 12 inches of my hair so that I could just give it to her to have the wig made. So we were all like excited that she was going to see her children grow up, go to high school, get married, all of that. And then in December, just like that, she turned for the worse. And within like 3 weeks of that news, she passed. Just a couple of days before Christmas and a day before her husband's birthday. It was such a difficult thing to like wrap my mind around. Like, how could someone that we prayed for so long and believed so hard for and fasted so hard for, how could she just go? And then the Lord just gave
I'm
us that.
gonna just give me a second. I'm gonna stop recording right now.